Good morning, I am Jean-Marc Coicaud, the Director of the Division of Global Affairs at Rutgers University, and welcome to this Global Affairs Voices series, which is part of our video activities in the context of the Division of Global Affairs. Today with us we have Ambassador Toscano, Roberto Toscano, from Italy, who is the former ambassador to India and Iran. You have had a long career in the Italian diplomatic service. You have been kind enough to come to Rutgers today to give a presentation later on in the context of a graduate seminar. But first of all, we are interviewing you here as a way for you to share with us your experience and lessons.
Thank you.
So thank you, Roberto, for being here. So you started your education. You were trained in the field of law, I believe.
Yes, I got a law degree in my hometown. I'm from Parma, Italy. Mm-hmm. And then I abandoned my legal vocation, which apparently was not so strong. And I moved on to international relations.
Okay.
2 years later, I got a master's degree from SAIS in Washington,
mm-hmm.
in international relations. And then went back to Italy and joined the Italian Foreign Service in 69.
Why 69? So why becoming a diplomat? Why was...
Well, as a matter of fact, it's strange because, some people have an early vocation.
Mm-hmm.
When they are teenagers or even before, they want to become ambassadors, diplomats. But that was not my case. I just knew what I was interested in. I just
mm-hmm.
knew the books I wanted to read
mm-hmm.
and the languages I wanted to learn. And so at the end of this process, after my master's degree, I said, what do I do with it? And diplomacy was almost natural at that stage.
And it was a good choice.
It was a good choice.
So you served in many countries. You served in Russia, in Chile, and other...
Russia, first Chile, then Chile 71, 74.
Important period.
Yes. Then the Soviet Union 75, 79.
Mm-hmm.
Then Rome, because in between you go back to headquarters. Then it was Spain, 83, 87. Then I had a sabbatical at Harvard, at Center for International Affairs.
Which
CFIA, 87, 88.
I was there.
Of course you were there. We were there.
Yes, we were together.
And then after, then I moved to Washington, 88, 91. I was deputy, head of mission of the embassy until 91. Then back to Rome. In Rome for about 7 years, I was head of policy planning because that's what I really wanted to do. Then it was Geneva, 94, 99, UN Geneva. Then back to Italy, and then my last two posts were as ambassador, first to Iran, 5 years, and then to India, 2 years. At the end of 2010, I reached my age limit, and let's say first semester of 2011, I was at the Wilson Center
in Washington.
as a policy scholar for 6 months.
Yes, because not only that you're a diplomat, but you're also a writer and philosopher. You have published a number of books in the field of ethics and international affairs, available in Italian and in English, and we have worked together in the past in this area. So you started with Chile and Russia, and then at the time the Soviet Union, and then ended up with Iran and India. So why don't we begin with the beginning?
Good.
Chile and Russia. Tell us a bit about your experience about these two countries in very important years.
Well, there are times when people say that their own political and even ethical views are shaped by the books they read. In my case, well, I read some very important books. For instance, Albert Camus, talking about someone who might be also dear to you. But basically, it's the life experiences that I had early on in my career. After Chile, the coup d'etat, refugees in the Italian embassies, and then the Soviet Union, and I came out with something that I like to repeat and makes my friends laugh. And I say, I never met a dissident I didn't like. Mm-hmm. So this thing, in spite of the fact that for 40 years I was a loyal servant of a state, of a government, my sympathies, I confess, were always with those repressed by governments.
And so precisely being a young diplomat in Santiago de Chile in
71 to 77.
So how was it? I mean,
first of all,
so you lived the 2 years.
2 years of Allende, the one of Pinochet,
and then the coup.
And then the coup.
In September 73.
It was really a very shocking experience, but also, in a strange way, when you can do something for other people, then things become, in a way, easier. It seems as if there is no alternative. I mean, you had people in the embassy, and you had to save them. You're not a hero. You just make things normal. It is normal.
And you had at the time directives coming from the ministry. You know, you have to save these people. Was it because there is always a tension? Or was it individual initiative?
Okay. Well, this is a very
tricky question.
Tricky, almost nasty, because you know that I only tell the truth.
Yes.
And the truth can be very complicated. Okay, I was not in charge of the embassy. I was junior diplomat, secretary.
Yeah.
And the one who was in charge of the embassy was a chargé d'affaires. The ambassador was in Italy at the time of the coup because of some family reasons, and he was never sent back. So young,
up to you.
Young people took over.
Yes.
And we, of course, started, first we protected a few Italians, and we took them to the embassy because they were in danger. I went a couple of times to the Stadio Nacional to pick up people who were arrested. But then Chileans, who had nothing to do with Italy, started jumping across the wall into the residence of the embassy. And so we started sending cables to Italy saying, what do we do? Well, one day historians will look into the files and they will say, these people keep awful files because there are a lot of cables from Santiago, but they lost all the cables from Rome to Santiago. Well, that is not the case.
There was no answer given to you.
No. So what happened? The bureaucratic trick. You send out a cable saying, unless I receive contrary information, I will. 1, 2, 3, meaning I will keep them. Ask for their safe conduct and send them to Italy. And that's what we did. Well, nothing happened to me, but my colleague who was in charge didn't have a splendid career after that. Because, you know, at that time, can you imagine anybody in Rome signing a cable saying, kick them out, have them shot? Nobody. They didn't dare, but they hated our guts.
But
that's about ethics in international affairs.
But that was the right thing to do.
I know. I'm so glad, and also my colleague is glad.
And then you moved to Moscow. So,
then I moved to Moscow.
So
and then
how was Moscow in the 70s?
Well, you know, the first thing is that in Chile, a red flag was revolution, protest. And in Moscow, a red flag was conservative.
Yes.
It was regime. So you have to always to switch. You know, and there, you can make a difference that is not preconceived.
And you speak Russian.
Yes, I
you
spoke
are multilingual.
Russian.
You speak Spanish, French, Italian,
and
Russian. Yes.
You have to understand who is doing what to whom. Ideology by itself. Well, I'm more progressive than conservative, but that's not the point. Because the day that so-called progressives, you know, like communists there, start repressing people and damaging society because of lack of creativity, we know what happened to the Soviet Union. How can you be on their side because you're leftist? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense, at least to me. So my political education was very deep and strong because of those two experiences. The Soviet Union, well, I cannot claim that I saw the demise of the system. But when I went back in '79, I published some articles. And reading them now, I see what I wrote was, nobody believes in this system anymore. You find the cynics, the opportunists, the dissidents. But in 5 years, in the Soviet Union, I didn't meet people who really believed in the system.
And you felt that it was
it's a weakness. It's an incredible weakness. I mean, you can have, you know, a knight in armor, but then you look inside, and the person is dead, although the strength is apparently
so
still there.
The system had no true active support from within.
No, it was a tired system. It was and this, if I can jump to the present time,
yes,
makes me a little more hopeful also for the case of Iran.
Yes.
Because there is such a thing as late revolutionary regimes. Late revolutionary regimes maintain all the rhetoric, but fewer and fewer people believe
in it.
this.
Yeah.
After all,
So these are empty
good
words.
old Nye
Yeah.
about soft power means something.
Yeah.
You cannot just, as somebody said, you can do anything with bayonets except sitting on them.
Yes.
And so no regime can really continue for too long after it has lost the hegemony, talking about Gramscian
Yeah, yeah.
term. And so I've become a little more optimistic.
And so precisely, so you, throughout the 2000s, you served in India, you were the ambassador of Italy
Yes.
to India, and then Iran. So you
First
served,
Iran and then India.
First Iran and India. So let's begin with India and then we'll finish with Iran.
Oh, yes.
So you served in India when India started to emerge as a key country among the BRICS. So what was your impression? What were your feelings while serving there? Did you see the change in terms of the country emerging and so on?
Well, with India, it's an extremely contradictory feeling that I perceived after those 2 years. Well, first of all, 2 years in India is not sufficient.
Yes.
I've become very modest when they
Yes.
ask me to talk about India, because it's more like a continent than a country. But my impressions are the following. It is true that there has been a burst of growth and creativity, but what has not been done might be so negative as to affect the growth itself. What? First of all, inequality is exaggerated. It has actually increased. At the time that the country grew,
So it's
the gap has increased.
So it's still a major problem.
Huge. So I had lived in many different countries in South America, for instance, when you have poverty, but poverty like in India I had never seen. And in Iran everybody eats,
Yes.
everybody has a roof over their heads, nobody sleeps on the pavement. So poverty is something.
So
this is the first shock.
Yes.
The inequality and the poverty. And then infrastructures. Infrastructures. In this sense, although I have no doubt, I'm not a relativist, I think that democracy is better than non-democracy. And I choose India over China, for instance. But in China, they did a lot of work in health, education, infrastructure, which has not been done in India.
So you would caution against the idea that yes,
Yes.
India is, and I totally agree with you. So the rise of India is quite questionable.
And you see it now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The economic growth is going down,
Yes. And last but not least, politics, meaning
Yes.
corruption.
yeah,
Meaning hereditary politics.
Yeah.
The Congress Party, which is the more progressive one, is tied to this hereditary link of the Gandhi family, and now the system is stuck because Rahul Gandhi, who was supposed to take over, apparently doesn't have the will or maybe the capacity. I mean, he's a good, smart, well-meaning young man, but politics is something, it's like music, you have the ear or you don't have it. Probably he doesn't. And so they don't know what to do. And the opposition is really something that you wouldn't want to see in the place of the Congress Party, because they are not a modern pro-capitalist party. They have some basic instincts that are communal. They are right-wing Hindu,
Yeah.
very dangerous. So India is, having said that, you can also get enthusiastic because of the sophisticated art, culture, and creativity, and young population. So, of course, India has a great future. But right now, they have to do something now.
and we have to find out whether or not it will be done.
Yes.
Iran. Let's finish with Iran.
Well,
It's
Iran,
still in the news.
Of
What's your
course.
assessment of the situation?
Iran,
You told me earlier in the conversation that you tell us a bit about this tension between liberals and Democrats,
oh yeah.
which applies also to a certain extent to Iran.
Recently I've been told that Iranians are humiliated by the fact that the Arab Spring produced some results, and they, in 2009, in spite of millions of people in the street, they were not able to. So there is a saying in Farsi which rhymes. It says, "Why Tunisia could and we could not." one of the reasons, let's take Tahrir Square and the streets of Tehran. Who was there in the two, let's say, big protests? In Iran, first of all, the slogan was, "Where is my vote?" So, political election. In Tahrir Square, the slogan was, "Where is my vote? Where is my dignity? Where is my money? Where is my justice?" It was much wider appeal. And this also, as far as social class is concerned, there is no doubt that the millions of people were basically in Iran middle class. The humble stayed on the sideline. Not that they're necessarily enthusiastic about a regime that makes a mess of the economy, that provokes the world and maybe will even give them another war. No, that's not the point. In Egypt, there were labor union leaders in the coalition against Mubarak. There were religious people, non-religious people, tradition. It was a much wider social base. And this also links up to another question. It is true that it's very difficult to believe that Ahmadinejad in 2009 won the election of the first tour. But in 2005, he did win.
He did.
Nobody questioned that. And in 2009, maybe he didn't win the first tour, but personally I think, had he won in the second, I would have said, yeah, possible. Although with some doubts. But the problem, so the question is, who is still in favor of Ahmadinejad? The answer is simple. Ahmadinejad is not a new Khomeini. He's a Chavez. Populism. And populism means resentment of common people against elites. Against all elites. In Iran, the resentment is against the clergy. Even people who are highly religious, and Iranians are religious by and large, despise the clergy because now the clergy is associated with power and privilege.
And money.
And money, which is true. Isn't it?
Yes.
So, you see, this thing creates, of course, my friends in Iran are middle class, educated, they studied at Harvard, and I've even written books with them and stuff. But there is this limit. If you look at their platforms, it's music to my ears.
But it doesn't talk to the people in a way.
No. There is very little social.
And isn't it the key issues which the Middle East has to address?
Everywhere.
Everywhere too, yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think
Absolutely.
that Hezbollah is strong?
Yeah.
Because of the Quran and the Kalashnikov? No. They have social work. They have schools. They have doctors. Same with the Muslim Brotherhood.
And in a way, you also encounter this crisis of political representation in the West. I mean, this is something that we're witnessing in Europe, certainly in France,
Absolutely.
in Italy, in Spain, and that we also have in the US.
It's very dangerous because there are some non-democratic forces that have a democratic appeal. I mean, even the Golden Dawn in Greece, which are the sinister neo-Nazis, they have social work because they know. But the way to get...
But so isn't it a paradox, Roberto? Because in a way, somehow the liberals are the people whom we need for advancing democracy, but in a way, the liberals have abandoned people.
Absolutely.
So how do we go about this?
You know why? Something happened very deep. Probably because for about most of my career, I was an East-West man, Cold War. And you know, there are times when I think that the end of communism was God sent for the people, for the poor people who had the misfortune of living under communism. But it was not good news for us. Because our system had to reply to that challenge by giving something to common people. Welfare, unions, free education. That challenge had a lot to do with our response. Now that the challenge is no longer there, communism is over, but social democracy is not in good shape either. So, going back to the very basic instincts of capitalism has been a very major revolution, not only political and economic, but cultural. Right now, anything that sounds like, left-wing it's like old hat. It's no longer modern. It's no longer compatible with an efficient market. So liberals today have abandoned that ground on which they could claim to express
Yeah.
and besides, the link that you have to establish is that you don't have development because you don't have democracy. Because if you don't have democracy and division of power and an independent judiciary, then power will be corrupt and crony. Right now, crony capitalism is galloping furiously from Russia to China, everywhere.
To the US.
To the US. Crony capitalism. And you know, I'm sure you've seen the wonderful reporting in the New York Times in the past few days about subsidies that are given to a business without any real control and without any real effect.
So what to do?
I think that progressive thought should try again to combine political and social. Because you know, the big mistake, the tragedy of progressive thought was because of communism, said, well, first we need justice. Democracy is something bourgeois. Democracy is not something bourgeois. If you want justice, you need democracy. But until now, until this very day, these two dimensions of human existence have been put in alternative. And this is a tragedy.
Yeah.
But I think it's very difficult to imagine where some renewed political thinking can come from.
So perhaps as a way to conclude these conversations, because we designed it for a 20 minutes exercise, so you retired a few years ago, but you are still very active. You are writing a book on Iran. You are, you continue to have a very strong interest in ethics, and based on your writing, based on your track record as a practitioner, as a diplomat, clearly you don't see that there is a strong difference between ethics and politics. In fact, ideally the two things should work together. Any words of wisdom for the young generation? We are here at Rutgers at the Division of Global Affairs. We have close to 150 students studying for a master, for a PhD. What is your advice for the next generation?
My first message to the young generation is an expression of apology, because my generation really didn't leave a better world. Think about environment, think about indebtedness of public dimension, think about jobs. We really, you say screwed up?
You can say this.
It's terrible. So it's honest apology. But having said that, I think that the world is not over, and young people have the right, and I would almost say the duty, to think about the future in spite of these awful conditions of unemployment and everything. But probably what should be done is to focus on some basic goals. I tell you what, for instance, I also know, having lived under communism, that was not an alternative. But in order for the Western model to be acceptable and working, there were some very important conditions that right now are not there. I'm talking about meritocracy and social mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, everywhere in this country,
Absolutely.
more than in Europe,
Absolutely.
you stay where you are born. I think that is the worst failure of our system that should be addressed. So the real demand is legality, meritocracy, and as a consequence, social mobility.
And that's where education is very, very important.
And that's, so I get to the end point that education is at the core. Let me end with a personal note, because this is not what I read about, this is my story.
Yeah.
I came from a family where nobody had even gone to high school, but growing up in the 50s and 60s in Italy, which was not a communist state, but was a moderately social state, I had the best public free education available. And that explains.
And then you could, take advantage of the opportunities, as a way to
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, to me, education is probably one of the main areas in which
And in fact, we certainly believe in this message at Rutgers, because it's a public university, geared towards somehow servicing the state and the nation and students from around the world, with in mind the strong sense of public good.
Yes.
Roberto, thank you for being here. We hope that you'll come back.
Definitely.
So we had this conversation here with Ambassador Roberto Toscano, the former Italian ambassador to India and Iran, and a key diplomat from Italy. I am Jean-Marc Coicaud, the director of the Division of Global Affairs, and I thank you for watching. See you next time. Thank you.